Bellagio. Made it back to the gym today. That's 2 for 2 in our new exercise challenge 2017 going into 2018 challenge thing. You're probably wondering why I'm always here in the sports book. Multiple reasons. One is proximity to the poker room. Poker room's right back there. 2, ample seating. 3, usually pretty quiet over here. Audio issues, ongoing concerns on the blog, but definitely one of the quieter spots in the Bellagio Hotel Casino Spa Suites Resort. Today is Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend. I posted the previous vlog sometime this morning, around 10 a.m. I think. Lots of interesting feedback coming in. Appreciate all the feedback that you guys have given on the, not necessarily predicament maybe, but just situation concerning whether or not to limit my playing hours and focus on cranking out more vlogs, or just do my thing, play my hours, my usual hours, end up with those 12-hour sessions if need be, and let the vlogs come out as they may. It seems like that is the sort of consensus. Let the vlogs come out as they may, play the 12-hour sessions, don't limit the hours. I think that's fairly reasonable and probably should have been expected. I think most people sort of think of me as a poker player. After all, it is my job, and it's been my job for almost the past, well, over a decade now, I think, which is somewhat crazy to think about. I think it probably does make most sense to just focus on the hours, getting the hours at the poker table that I need, especially if the game is good. Never cut the hours short if the game is really good. Definitely makes a lot of sense. I think one thing to consider though is that even though I've spent the last 10 years as a professional poker player, I guess I don't necessarily think of myself as a poker player first and all else secondary. Like I said, it's definitely my profession, and if someone were to ask me what it is that I do, I would still say poker player, but I guess I just don't think of myself as, I don't know how else to say it other than just consisting of the embodiment of a poker player. That probably sounds very weird, but I think I've sort of kept it somewhat of a theme in this vlog that you should always be sort of assessing your happiness level in whatever it is that you are doing and pursuing. And just because you've been doing something for the past several years or however long of a time span, that doesn't mean that you always need to do that, and you should definitely be willing to, you know, change it up a little bit if your interests take you in a different direction. Anyway, it doesn't really matter too much at the moment because I'm still on the grind and plan to be on the grind for indefinite future. Speaking of the grind, like I said, back here at the Bellagio, we're getting back into the 510. By the way, I'm sitting in what's called the overflow section. These poker tables are literally in the sports book. The reason they have all these extra poker tables here in the sports book at the moment is because the WPT Five Diamond is going on here at the Bellagio. Don't know how many events really that consists of, but it's a proper WPT spot and has been for many years now. All these tables are, well, they're not in use now, but should the demand for poker require extra tables, which it often does when there's tournaments going on and they need the extra space, poker happens in the sportsbook. Also, as a result of the WPT going on here, good number of games going on. So 4, 5, 10 games going on, hopping in the mix. Probably not gonna play a 4-hour session, but who knows? Maybe one of these days, I will surprise all of us, including myself. Just wrapping up the session here at approximately 3:30 a.m. Much more reasonable 8-hour session today. Slightly more reasonable than 12 hours and leaving at 10 a.m. You know, so it's amazing how sometimes poker is extremely difficult. We've had plenty of difficult sessions on the blog. The last session we played was easy sometimes and very difficult at other times. This session was pretty much smooth sailing the whole way through. I mean, you never play a session where you win every single hand, obviously, but this is one of those sessions where I don't know if there's gonna be too much to be learned from any of these individual hand histories themselves. Well, I guess you never really know, so let's take a look. In the first one, there's an under the gun limp. There's a middle position raised to 40. I looked at it 9-7 of clubs in the big blind. I decided to defend it, and the limper calls as well. So 3 ways to a flop. Flop comes king 8 deuce with 2 clubs. We check to the initial raiser, who bets 50. I make the call, other player folds. Turn is the queen of clubs, so we make a flush. I check it over to him. He bets 130. I flat call. River pairs the board. I check it over to him again, and this time he bets 320. I go ahead and make the call, since this player in particular is, I think he's a reg, and I'm pretty sure we've played a little bit before, so I don't expect him to be getting too out of line, and I don't expect him to be calling check raise with too many semi-marginal holdings. So I played a little bit passively, a little bit safe. I just flat call. He rolls over king queen for top 2 pair, and a flush beats top 2 pair. Next interesting hand, I look down at pocket aces, middle position. I make it 30 to go. There is a good player in the hijack who 3 bets to $100. Folds back to me, looking to put some more money in the pot, so I put in a 4 bet to $280. The hijack makes the call, so heads up to a flop. Flop in the nuts here. Ace, jack, 7, rainbow. Pretty favorable flop for the pocket aces. Having the board pretty crushed and having his continuing range, his calling range, pretty shut out here. I decided to check it over to him. Some good news, he puts in a bet, $180. I go ahead and call. Turn is an offsuit king. I check it over to him and he checks back. River's an 8. I guess there's a question of how much I should size here, or if I should bet at all versus check. I decided to bet. Don't really love my sizing too much. I bet $340. I think I should have sized down there, maybe get a crying call or possibly induce from my opponent on the river. 340 is what I bet, and unfortunately he folds. Next hand, I look down at ace king of hearts from under the gun and make it 30 to go. Only the player on the button makes the call, so we go heads up to a flop, which comes ace king 9 all clubs. I bet $40. The button calls. Turn is an offsuit queen. This time I bet $110, and the button puts in a raise. He makes it $320 to go. So it's an extra interesting spot because I happen to know the player on the button. He is a buddy of mine, and I've been playing with him for almost the entire time I have lived in Las Vegas. So I know this player very well. We have lots of history, and I pretty much have a good sense of various lines that he might take, especially versus myself. So all that being said, I think he's almost never bluffing here. Maybe occasionally he could be a level ahead. He could know that I know the things that I do know and has gone a level ahead of that. But all that being said, the things that I do know is that he's pretty rarely bluffing here. So I let it go, and very shortly after that, he tells me that he flopped the nuts. Of course, we even still have outs versus that hand, but 4 outs isn't really that many outs, so I just let it go. Versus some other players, I would for sure be very tempted to call there and peel into the river, see what happens on the river, see if my opponent is perhaps overvaluing a worse hand. This opponent is not overvaluing a worse hand. He's never raising there with a worse 2 pair. So that's that. It's almost another form of run good though, when you have somewhat of a cooler situation versus a player that you have a lot of history with, and you sort of have a very good sense of where you're at in that situation, and you can get away losing less than you might have versus some other players. The next hand, I open up jack 9 of diamonds from early position to 30. This time we get 2 calls. Flop comes 9-5-4 rainbow, so we flop top pair. I go ahead and bet $60, and both players call. Turn is a 7 of spades, which brings it back to our flush draw. This time I bet 150. Both players call again. River comes an offsuit jack. This time I bet $280. On these river bets, I'm just trying to get a call here, basically. I'm not trying to get too out of line here with my sizing on these rivers. Looking to get some value. First player folds, second player calls. I go ahead and show, and we win this one as well. Last interesting hand, the straddle is on. The under the gun player makes it $50 to go. Small blind calls. I look down at ace queen offsuit in the big blind. It's slightly different from the ace jack hand from the previous video. There's 4 or 5 callers, and we look down at ace jack offsuit in the big blind. I think this is a pretty good squeeze candidate because different in a couple ways. This one is a straddle pot, and if I put in a 3-bet, it's going to be a super bloated pot, and I'm going to be out of position. I also am much more happy to play ace queen out of position, or in general, than I am with that ace jack hand where I squeezed in the previous video. So this time I just go ahead and make the call, and the straddler calls as well. 4 ways to a flop of ace 9-4 rainbow. The small blind leads right out. He bets $80. I flat call and the other 2 players fold. Turn pairs the board on an offsuit 4. This time he checks it over to me, and I'm gonna try and get some value here. I think my hand is slightly under-repped. I think most players expect an ace queen or ace king hand to 3-bet pre-flop a lot of the time, at least. So time to get some value. I bet $160 and my opponent calls. River is a queen. So we improved to top 2 pair. It's another one of those situations where I'm gonna try and get some value. I'm gonna try and target a 1-pair hand that is chopping with most other aces. Ace jack and below can only chop versus other aces. So once again, this is a spot where I bet $290. My opponent thinks for a long time, goes into the tank, and eventually decides on a call. So that's good news. I show my hand, and we are scooping this one as well. Later on, my opponent tells me that he had ace jack. So I like my sizing there. I feel like we got pretty close to the maximum there on that run out. That's gonna do it. The session, like I said, for the most part, pretty smooth sailing. Obviously lost a couple of pots here and there, but for the most part, a welcomed smooth sailing session. We get into the game for $1,800, and we get out of the game for $4,053. That's a profit of $2,253. Not a bad day's work at all, and good games at the Bellagio during the 5 Diamond event. Like I said, 4 5-10 games going, and some fun games. Time to call it a night. What is the occasion? The occasion is, today is the anniversary of when I proposed to Busi. That will be a story for another episode in the vlog, but nothing too romantic planned for the day. We're actually getting together with some friends over at the best restaurant in Summerlin called Echo and Rig for a little Friendsgiving celebration. Time with some friends. Yeah, I'll have to get into that story of the proposal another time.